We're talking about a brand new franchise today. Since we looked at all the Disney animated films, don't worry, Pixar's coming. I wanted to take a break from Disney and do a completely different franchise. This franchise is a little complicated, mainly because it involves a lot of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Which means we're going to need the whiteboard. The franchise we're going to be looking at is the classic Planet of the Apes. Except we're not going to go in the order in which the movies were released. We're going to go in timeline order. And already, right off the bat, there's a problem. The first movie we're going to look at is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. But that movie is set in 2016. In the original Planet of the Apes movie, Matt Reeves' spaceship is launched in 1972. And the rest of the movie takes place in 3955. Throughout the movie of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, they reference a spaceship that's being launched. There's also a headline that reads, Lost in Space. I think the rocket ship they're referring to is Brent's rocket ship from the movie Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This helps make Rise of the Planet of the Apes the first movie of the franchise. Here we go with the first movie in the Planet of the Apes franchise. Today we're looking at Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I don't have a vendetta against James Franco as an actor, but it's hard for me to picture him playing a scientist trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, especially after one of his earlier projects, Pineapple Express. Or maybe it's range, I don't know, because honestly I can't think of anyone else to play this role better. Now, John Lithgow's performance in this movie was incredible, portraying a man with Alzheimer's. As someone who has had a family member with Alzheimer's, I could say his performance was pretty accurate. Draco Malfoy, Tom Felton is in this movie, and he was given all the nostalgic lines that reference the original movie. It's a madhouse! Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape! It was appropriate. You're supposed to hate his character in this movie, and yeah, I hate him in this movie. For all the right reasons, though. Caesar is obviously computer animated, but the CGI is just a mask for Andy Serkis's incredible performance. A performance that carries the entire franchise of 3 films. Love the movie. Talking more about Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I ran out of time in the last video, but I wanted to expand more on Andy Serkis's performance as Caesar. It's all motion capture, and ever since Lord of the Rings, Andy Serkis has become the king of motion capture. He just got finished playing King Kong, and now he's back to playing Caesar, another monkey. But Caesar has depth, meaning that Caesar is a highly intelligent ape, and without dialogue, Andy Serkis is to convey the identity crisis that Caesar's going through. Is Caesar a pet? He asked that flat out in the movie. Or is he intelligent enough to join society as a human? And ultimately, after his animal instincts kick in and he defends John Lithgow's character, you can just see the heartbreak in Caesar's eyes of what he actually is. There's a whole movie in between that leads up to this moment, but we wanted to see apes fight humans, right? Not only that, but we wanted to see the apes win, which they do. And I really enjoyed the story of how the apes became intelligent, while at the same time destroying the human race. It's a virus, repairs brainwaves, but kills humans in the process. Like I said, it's a good movie. Continuing with the Planet of the Apes franchise, and today we're talking about Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This is such a good sequel. In terms of Planet of the Apes timeline, it takes 10 years after Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Andy Serkis is back as Caesar, and he just does another incredible job. Remember, as I said before in another video, the CGI is just a mask. All the facial expressions are Andy Serkis's. Tensions are high this time around as the humans are trying to find a power source so they can have electricity. But unfortunately, it's beyond where the apes live. One ape in particular, Koba, does not trust humans at all. So much so that he takes control and it leads to all-out war. There's a whole movie here and I only have a minute to review it. And in my opinion, Koba is an amazing villain. You saw Koba in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and he makes it very clear as to why he does not trust humans at all. And much like the humans want the apes eliminated, well, certain humans, Koba wants the humans eliminated. It has a great final fight at the end, and Caesar says goodbye to his friend when he knows war is about to happen. Here's a strange connection I found in Dawn of Planet of the Apes. So the final fight scene takes place between Caesar and Koba. And as we all know, Andy Serkis is playing Caesar, and he is doing a wonderful job at that. Toby Cabell is doing the motion capture and voice for Koba. Now here's where it gets interesting, because these two have another ape in common. Andy Serkis did the motion capture for Peter Jackson's remake of the movie King Kong. However, Toby Cabell is the current Kong for the monster universe that ultimately led up to Kong vs. Godzilla. This Kong is different than Peter Jackson's Kong and all the other King Kongs because, well, they had to make King Kong taller so he could fight Godzilla. So we got Andy Serkis, King Kong, and Toby Cabell as Kong, and they had faced off prior in Dawn of Planet of the Apes as Caesar and Koba. It's little things like that that make me go, was that intentional? Or just a great coincidence? Talking about the Planet of the Apes franchise. And today we're going to be finishing off the Caesar trilogy with War for the Planet of the Apes. Following along on our timeline, it takes place 5 years after Dawn of Planet of the Apes. Don't worry, the whiteboard's going to come in handy soon. The movie by itself I really enjoyed. I just wish they would change the title of the movie, because we don't get a whole lot of war in this movie. We got more war in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and Rise of the Planet of the Apes than we did in War for the Planet of the Apes. This movie is more of Caesar's revenge story. A ruthless colonel played by Woody Harrelson raids the apes' home and kills Caesar's wife and oldest son. Caesar then sets out on a quest to kill the colonel, but incidentally it leads to the entire ape herd being trapped by the colonel. Again, the movie itself really is good. Bad Ape's my favorite character. They find a girl along the way, they name her Nova, and she serves no purpose in the movie except for nostalgia's sake from the original Planet of the Apes. And the movie has kind of a sad ending, even though all the apes survive, but we know that humanity is doomed. Alright, I gotta talk about Woody Harrelson for a second. Because he's in War of the Planet of the Apes, and he plays the colonel that is just heartless and ruthless. And it's not the first time that Woody Harrelson has taken a role like that. I mean, he played the crazy Mickey Knox in Natural Born Killers, which is why I was totally okay with him playing Carnage in Venom Let There Be Carnage. And I know I'd get a lot of comments if I didn't mention him as Tallahassee in Zombieland. And then, of course, there's him playing Haymitch in the Hunger Game movies. I'm not saying he can't play crazy, or heartless, or ruthless. I just find it very difficult to see him fill those roles. And every single time I see him perform a role like that, I'm absolutely surprised because he pulled it off. The reason why I can't see Woody Harrelson play these roles I love to hate him in is because he played the innocent, lovable Woody from Cheers. It's a total 180 of the characters he plays in movies, and I'm just not used to seeing him perform anything other than this character. Talking about the Planet of the Apes franchise. And today we're talking about the movie Planet of the Apes. No, not that one. I mean, maybe we'll get to that one. I don't know. There we go, the original Planet of the Apes. But before we start talking about the movie, let's look at the whiteboard. The movie kind of starts off in 1972. This is when Taylor's spaceship is launched. But they wake up all the way here in the year 3955. Taylor wakes up to what I guess is a malfunction on the ship. Him and his crew weren't supposed to be sleeping as long as they did, and what woke them up was a crash landing on the planet. A planet overrun by apes. And humans are the more primitive species. I gotta admit, I'm not a huge fan of Charlton Heston, but he does really well in this movie. He doesn't speak the first half when he meets the apes, but as an audience member, you can feel his frustration trying to communicate with these apes. I'm from a different solar system. I'm not primitive. Ultimately, the movie is about conspiracy and the apes wanting to stay in power. I'll talk about that in the next video. This is my favorite moment. You're just so damn dug. I ran out of time in the last video, so let's delve deeper into the conspiracy I was talking about in Planet of the Apes. The apes Cornelius and Zero discover that Taylor here is more advanced than the other humans, because the apes believe that they are, and always have been, the most evolved species on the planet. So much so where you see several scenes where the apes are being taught out of like a scroll or a Bible of how the way things used to be. Things were peaceful, food was plentiful, apes got along with other apes, it was a paradise, it was no problem. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Planet of the Apes. It isn't until the end of the movie that we learn, as well as Taylor does, that he's been on Earth the entire time. Prior to that, Cornelius, Zira, and Taylor discovered that humans were the higher evolved on that planet at some point. And Dr. Zaius knew it the entire time. But what does Dr. Zaius do to keep their belief system thriving? And the apes to believe that they are the hierarchy, so they can remain in power? He destroys the evidence. The movie gets you thinking. This is such an interesting point to bring up. And if you haven't seen my video about where I talk about the conspiracy behind Planet of the Apes, go watch that video and then come on back. Now, as an audience member, let's think about this for a second. The movie is called Planet of the Apes. An intriguing title. We could theorize with that title that this movie is going to be a B movie. You know, unlike a film like Star Wars. Ooh, war, action, and star, so it has to be in space. Space, war, action, I'm there. But then you come across Planet of the Apes. I know, Planet of the Apes was made in 1968 and Star Wars was made in 1977. I'm just talking about the titles. But then you watch the movie and you realize the whole movie is about conspiracy and power struggle, religion and politics. One ape who knows the truth and destroys the evidence to stay in power. Can we think of anything at all that might be happening now where it sounds similar? Talking about the Planet of the Apes franchise. And today we're looking at the sequel to the original Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And this movie is just wow. Let's go to the whiteboard. Beneath the Planet of the Apes takes place right after Planet of the Apes. The timeline also ends right here. To give away the ending of the movie, literally everyone dies. Alright, so there's this ape that wants to go into the neutral zone because he detects that there's some sign of life out there. Cornelius and Zero just think it's Taylor, but it doesn't really matter because they're not in the movie for that long. Neither is Taylor for that matter. The movie revolves around Brent, who's on a rescue mission to try and save Taylor. Brent escapes the ape city and runs into another race of humans. They speak telepathically, and they're ugly as sin. They also worship an atomic bomb. I mean, these guys right here make the Temple of Doom look like Catholic Mass. It's an insane movie that you have to see to believe. Let's talk more about Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Like I said, this movie is one of those films that you gotta see to believe. And the concept that there's an entire planet with just apes on it, I mean, that's enough to try to wrap your head around. This movie takes a hard left turn into the world of just weird. There's a race of humans that live underground, and I guess we're supposed to assume that some humans remain primitive while others evolved into this telepathic weird cult. They worship an atomic bomb. Not sure I should be showing this image. And at least 10 minutes of the movie is like this church service that's worshiping the atomic bomb. I mean, they have songs and passages. It's weird, okay? It's weird. And what's even more weird was the ending. Brent and Taylor managed to meet up. Brent dies by getting shot in the head. Taylor gets shot himself, and he's the one that triggers the atomic bomb. The movie ends with the bomb exploding, and we still have 3 more movies to go. Okay, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. The first Planet of the Apes movie. It delved in conspiracy and religious hierarchy and government. You watch the original Planet of the Apes and it gets you thinking about some of these concepts. And then you watch Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Brent is an okay hero, but he doesn't have any depth like Taylor did. In fact, I would say that Brent had it easier, even though the telepaths try to make him kill Nova and Taylor. I'm also thinking about the time when this movie was released. It was released in 1970. Vietnam was a thing, Watergate was a thing. I mean, not a whole lot of Cold War stuff going on. So why make a movie where a bunch of people worship an atomic bomb? Especially with Alpha and Omega inscribed on the fin. It's almost like this movie did want to make a political statement, but they couldn't decide on which one to make. So they just jumbled them all in one movie, threw it at an audience, and just trying to hope something would stick. I mean, you can make the comparison that the apes were Americans invading the Forbidden Zone, and that could be Vietnam. I mean, there's so much about this movie to unpack, and yet there isn't. Talk about the Planet of the Apes franchise. Yep, we're still going, even though Taylor destroyed the Planet of the Apes. Because the next movie is Escape from the Planet of the Apes. Whiteboard! Alright, Taylor destroys the planet in 3955. However, before the planet's destroyed, Cornelius and Zero decide to get into a spaceship, and they ride that time-travel space anomaly that got Taylor to the future. Except this time, Cornelius and Zero ride it all the way to the past. They travel from 3955 all the way over to 1973, which could possibly branch out a new timeline now. But we'll get to that in another video. Cornelius and Zero seem to be accepted by society. However, Dr. Otto Hesseline asks the question, if we had an opportunity now to prevent the apes from ever taking control of the planet, shouldn't we seize that opportunity now? He also knows the world ends in 3955. The ending of this movie for me was really shocking. Not so much the twist at the end, because I saw that one coming, but this movie is a good setup for the next Planet of the Apes film. What does Star Wars got to do with anything? Everything! First of all, the original video was trying to convey that the title of a movie can be misleading as to how deep a movie can be. You get a movie like Planet of the Apes, you can automatically think that it's a B movie. Whereas with a movie like Star Wars, you know you're going to get a lot of action, and you're going to get a lot of space battles, and it's going to be more interesting to see without a deeper meaning. However, there is another movie that features the Planet of the Apes. They're riding their horses along the beach, and they come across what appears to be the Statue of Liberty, when in fact, it's Mega made from Spaceballs. So we can come to the conclusion that Spaceballs and Planet of the Apes are within the same universe, right? But wait, there's more. The diner at the end of Spaceballs. You see that red circle in the picture here? Well, that's the Millennium Falcon. So that means that Planet of the Apes could be in the same universe as Spaceballs, which is also in the same universe as Star Wars. Huh? Oh, that's right. Star Wars is in the past, Planet of the Apes is in the future. Darn it! So if you're following along with the Planet of the Apes franchise, we just covered Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and we hit a snag with the timeline. To the whiteboard! In the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes in 2016, the simian flu is released as a global pandemic. In War of the Planet of the Apes in 2031, the surviving humans are beginning to regress and turn primitive because of the simian flu. However, in the movie Escape from the Planet of the Apes in 1973, Cornelius explains how the apes evolved. There was a disease that was getting rid of the dog and cat population. Not the dogs. So humans took in apes as domestic pets. The apes began to evolve because of their exposure with humans, to the point where they start cleaning and cooking and doing all sorts of services for humans. Then they become aware of slavery. That's when the apes begin to group together and revolt against the humans and win. So where does that leave us with the timeline? Or you can look at it one of two ways. They're two separate franchises with two different stories. Or, because there's a 2,000-year time difference from here to here, maybe the story got changed. In my previous video, I talked about a continuity error between Escape from the Planet of the Apes and Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I recommend you go watch that video and then come on back. I ended the video saying you could take the continuity error in one of two ways. Either they're two separate franchises and they don't link or exist within the same world, or because there's 2,000 years between 1973 and 3955, maybe the story got changed. I'm going to roll with the latter because it's just too much fun and I like to let my imagination go wild. Because remember what I said in the first Planet of the Apes movie, what it's actually all about. Religious and government hierarchy. It could very well be that the apes changed the scrolls in the history of what happened to make themselves look more evolved and more peaceful and less primitive, more like the perfect race. And that's why there's no mention of Koba in any of the scrolls or the Bibles that the apes have. They want to project that they were always in unity and that they were always peaceful, ignoring the fact that they had war in between. We still have Conquest and Battle of the Planet of the Apes to go. Let's see how the story unfolds. Still talking about the Planet of the Apes franchise. We are 7 movies in, and we're trying to keep track of where everything falls on the timeline. And today we're looking at Conquest of the Apes. Where does it fall on the timeline? Let's find out. To the whiteboard! So I had Escape of the Planet of the Apes branch off into 1973 on a separate timeline. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes takes place 20 years later in 1991. And much like Escape to Planet of the Apes, this movie has a social commentary. The movie centers around Caesar, Kira and Cornelius' son. As Armando tries to make his way back into society, Caesar is ultimately captured and trained as a pet ape. At the same time, the government is looking for the ape who can speak. After a bunch of movie happens, they find out that it's Caesar, and they torture him. Caesar's words to the government are, "Have mercy." It's at that point Caesar leads the rebellion against the humans, and Roddy McDowall delivers a great speech at the end of the movie as Caesar. This movie was so good. And we get to witness the birth of the Planet of the Apes. Talking about Planet of the Apes and how everything fits in the same timeline. So because there's some time travel involved in Escape from Planet of the Apes, there's some inconsistencies that happen with how the apes evolved and rose to power. But one thing that's consistent, it all revolves around an ape named Caesar. So let's compare Planet of the Apes with a different timeline that uses similar storytelling. Terminator. In the first Terminator movie, all we know is that Sarah Connor is the mother of John Connor, and there's absolutely no mention of who his father is. Then time travel happens, and we find out that Kyle Reese is now John Connor's father. Alright, now let's go back to Planet of the Apes. A female ape named Bright Eyes gives birth to Caesar. There's no mention of who the male mate is. And then time travel happens, and Zira and Cornelius give birth to an ape named Milo, who's renamed Caesar. See, this is why Doctor Who says wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. But one thing is for certain with the Planet of the Apes timeline. Apes rising up and ruling the world is inevitable, and Caesar is always the leader. Talking about the Planet of the Apes franchise, and today concludes the original saga of Planet of the Apes. We're talking about Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And this movie was a good high note to leave on. Not like the previous films where it left a shocking or ambiguous ending. To the whiteboard! Alright, technically the movie takes place in 2670, but the lawgiver is telling a story, so it really takes place before then. The movie's not really that specific, but I figure it's either 2000, 2004, or 2020. The movie continues on with Caesar and how he's king of the ape village, and they seem to be doing alright and they're coexisting with humans. But of course, there's always that one gorilla, Aldo in this case. But the real enemy are the humans that live outside of the ape city, in what will be known as the Forbidden Zone. I tell you, when this movie says battle, this movie produced a battle. And the enemies represent the mutants that we see in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So they're kind of bridging the gap between the two timelines. Not much to say about this movie. The whole movie's in the title. Battle, Planet of the Apes. Well, we're talking about the Planet of the Apes franchise, and because it's out there, I suppose I'll talk about it. The 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes, directed by Tim Burton. I remember when this movie was first released, all the critics and the people that I knew that saw the movie, they all said pretty much the same thing. We didn't want Planet of the Apes to be remade. We didn't need Planet of the Apes to be remade. This movie is unnecessary. Yet it was the highest grossing movie in the box office, and all my friends complaining that the movie was a remake kept seeing it over and over again. Now, I recently rewatched it, and, it's a very safe movie. Meaning you have a very obvious villain. Thade couldn't be more of a villain if he tried. But Tim Roth's performance is just over the top, villainous, he's evil. And you have Helena Bonham Carter, who looks beautiful even with all the chimpanzee makeup on, as the supporting character, and Mark Wahlberg as an action star. I'll get more nitpicky in the next video, but this movie was made because of updated special effects and makeup. Let's talk more about Tim Burton's 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes. And yeah, I'm saying the word remake and not reboot. And to explain why, we're going to go to the whiteboard. After Battle of the Planet of the Apes, it seems like humans and apes were going to live coexistently forever. Or the movie was just going to bridge the gap between 2670 and 3955. It's not explained. But where does Tim Burton's remake fits in all this? It doesn't. I had to create a new timeline. The movie starts off in 2029. Apes aren't evolved and man is traveling through space. Much like Taylor was in 1972. And in both Planet of the Apes timeline, it takes place right here or right here where the apes are already evolved. Another main difference is that the humans are not primitive in this movie. Each and every one of them speaks English, and the humans are more slaves, unlike the original one where they were seen as more pets. Tim Roth was over the top as a villain in this movie, and he always seems to have this look where his head is down but his eyes are up. Because he's evil. Is it love? A couple final thoughts I had on the remake of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. I said it before and I'll say it again. Helena Bonham Carter looks beautiful in or out of ape makeup. However, the kiss between Ari and Davidson confuses me. Because there are several scenes where they're having these deep conversations by like a fire pit or something. And Ari's like, I wish I could go with you to see your world. And Davidson's accepting like, yeah, I want to take you with me. And then this kiss was without hesitation on either part. It could just be a kiss goodbye, but Ari seems to like really be into it with Davidson. Compared to the original Planet of the Apes, where this kiss is just lighthearted, funny. Zero's like, well, all right, but you're just so damned ugly. It's a kiss goodbye. It's a kiss of thank you for taking care of me. There's no romance there. And Zero's engaged to Cornelius anyway. Even if it is a romantic kiss, okay, that's an interesting subplot. But movie needs to make up your mind. Let's compare the two different Caesars in the Planet of the Apes franchise. There's Caesar from Rise, Dawn, and War for the Planet of the Apes. And throughout all three movies, Caesar is constantly evolving. In Rise of the Planet of the Apes, he only uses sign language to communicate. In Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, he uses a mixture of verbal language and sign language. Sign language mainly to communicate with the apes and verbal to communicate with the humans. And in War for the Planet of the Apes, Caesar's speaking full sentences practically throughout the entire movie. However, the apes do look up to him and respect him as a leader. Some of the ape population is easily swayed by Koba, but Caesar does his best. The 1970 Caesar is intelligent from the very beginning. In fact, they're trying to keep his intelligence a secret from humans because apes at this point are slaves. This Caesar is then a means to put an end to slavery, as opposed to this Caesar who just wants to survive. Also, both Caesars experience great tragedy in losing one of their sons. I don't necessarily have a favorite Caesar, but if you do, let me know. For the Planet of the Apes franchise, let's take a look at the evolution of the makeup. First of all, we'll just take a look at the original Caesar. It's the 1970s, and this is a really good job in terms of makeup. You can see Roddy McDowall and other actors play around with their noses, because there's nowhere to breathe around the mouth area except through the mouth. There are some shots where it's a close-up, you can see the actor's lips moving behind the prosthetic, but you really have to be looking, and it doesn't happen that often. Next, we'll take a look at Thade. The reason being because he's more detailed around the face and with the facial hair. And in 2001, there was CGI technology, but you don't really see that in the makeup unless a gorilla is doing a really big roar, and the CGI is used to exaggerate the mouth a little bit. And in my opinion, this is my favorite kind of makeup to do for a movie. Realistic, but not too much CGI. Unless, of course, you're Andy Serkis. And they capture all the actors' facial expressions and transpose that onto a CGI character. Now that's the proper way to do CGI. Let me know in the comments below how you like to see Planet of the Apes. CGI or makeup? Alright, let's do it. I'm going to rank my favorite Planet of the Apes films. I always seem to piss people off when I do these rankings, so bring on the hate. Here we go. At the bottom of the barrel at number 9 is Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This movie was just way too weird for me, and then peeling away the faces is... Not only that, but the end of the film where everybody on the entire planet dies. Yes, I understand Charlton Heston didn't want to do the sequel, but that's no excuse. It's still the worst of the movies. At number 8 is Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Now, the only reason why this movie is so low is because they gave Caesar a side story that I don't think he really needed. He wants to get to know his parents better, but the whole movie is centered around the battle for the Planet of the Apes. So it's almost like we have an hour of filler and 30 minutes of actual movie. At number 7, it's Tim Burton's remake of Planet of the Apes. They're apes, they're not superpowered. Why do they leap long distances? Credit where credit's due, the makeup was absolutely fantastic. The special effects were really good. But I'm kind of in the same boat with the critics when this movie was first released. It just seemed unnecessary and unneeded. It was worth one watch, and it was a fun watch, but not again. At number 6 is War for the Planet of the Apes. Yep, told you I'd piss people off. As I said in my review, this movie is called War for the Planet of the Apes. I was expecting battles where apes overthrew humans and stuff like that. Instead, we got Caesar's revenge story. I just think the movie should have gone into an entirely different direction, but with what we were given, it was still a decent film, and I will rewatch it just to complete the trilogy. At number 5, it's Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I honestly don't think there's really anything wrong with this movie. It's just there's other movies in the franchise I felt were a lot better than this one. I like watching Caesar's rise to power and convincing the other apes to kind of do mischievous things and sabotage. And Roddy McDowall as Caesar is absolutely brilliant. At number 4 is Escape from the Planet of the Apes. The movie had one of the most surprise endings I've ever seen. I really was not expecting them to kill off the two main characters. And also society accepting Zira and Cornelius as one of their own. We would do that, honestly. Us as a people, we would do that if we saw that on social media. At number 3, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. It's a good kickstart to a new trilogy of the franchise, and Andy Serkis again just delivers a phenomenal job as Caesar, and the final confrontation on the Golden Gate Bridge is absolutely classic. At number 2, the original Planet of the Apes. Brilliant storytelling, and even though it wasn't exactly like the original source material from the book, it is a good adaptation of what the original point of the book was. Religion and government hierarchy and how it takes over the entire civilization. And my number 1 pick is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. The tension between the apes and the humans I absolutely love. Koba is such a wonderful villain, causing the split between the apes on who their leader should be, Koba or Caesar. And for me, of all the Planet of the Apes films, this is the one I look forward to watching the most. There you have it. I'm expecting to piss people off, so go ahead and leave whatever comments you want.